Like, who in the name of God wanted the Nostalgia Critic to review the Cheetah Girls movie? So this video is going to be a deep dive into the Nostalgia Critic, or Doug Walker, the person, but also bad faith media criticism and the culture that he created and continues to participate in, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and what it means to be a review channel in the year of 2020. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new videos every Tuesday and Friday about race, feminism, and pop culture, so if you're into that, please subscribe and ring the bell. So without further ado, let's get started. So part 1, that guy with the glasses. So Doug first rose to fame with his quitting video, which I think went viral here on YouTube in like 2008. He originally worked as a night janitor while also posting videos on his site, thatguywiththeglasses.com, where he would rant about vintage video games as well as movies and TV shows and later commercials. He also, I think, used to draw cartoons for like toy vending machines, and he still does art today for his channel, as seen on his public Facebook page. Overall, he's just a guy who lives in the suburbs of Chicago who wanted to make funny videos about nostalgic things he loved as a kid and that others loved too. Later, he would rebrand himself as the Nostalgia Critic and also be moved under the Channel Awesome umbrella. And Channel Awesome is a company that hires producers to create content for them. Doug quickly became one of Channel Awesome's favorite creators, and of course his brother Rob, who used to appear on the channel but not so much anymore, is of course the COO of the company. Under Channel Awesome, Doug moved to YouTube, where he would become bigger than ever. He garnered 1 million followers, did record numbers with his Shark Boy and Lava Girl review, It review, and other movie reviews, one of which was screened in theaters. On YouTube, he was able to reach a wider audience of wannabe critics or critic-curious folks like me, and helped usher in a new era of film criticism, for better or for worse. Doug also produced multiple films with Channel Awesome, worked on a fair use campaign about copyright strikes, and also shared personal anecdotes about his life on his channel, such as his mother passing and not using the F word for an entire year to prove to people that he's still funny even when he doesn't curse. He continues to do charity shoutouts at the end of his videos and has a dedicated sponsorship with Stamps.com, where he takes out 5 minutes of each video to air a commercial/skit he does about Stamps.com. Today, in the year of our Lord 2020, Doug is still just a guy with glasses, but he seems to be blissfully unaware, or at least doesn't care about the harm he's done to others or the harm that he's done to the media landscape when it comes to reviewing movies. So part 2, what is bad faith media criticism? Bad faith media criticism is when you make arguments that don't really have to do with the media that you're critiquing. For example, questioning the logic of the Beast's castle from Beauty and the Beast. Does it really matter if every piece of silverware has a human equivalent or not? How does that impact the story? Or when you point out, hey, the Enchantress is kind of an for turning a child into a beast. Like, this is the logic of the film, and you just have to suspend your disbelief because that's the movie you're watching, and none of that has anything to do with the movie being good or not. If anything, we've seen how taking these criticisms seriously can greatly damage the remakes of said films. For example, Disney's meta-commentary on their old films as seen in the new remakes. Rather than actually trying anything new, the remakes seem to be responding to years and years of bad faith media criticism perpetuated by CinemaSins, Everything Wrong With videos, and other channels solely dedicated to pointing out problems with your favorite media and wanting to ruin your childhood, or making you feel like an idiot for liking things with problems. And Disney isn't just giving meta-commentary on their films to seem woke, but also to be like, we're in on the joke too. We also know the Beast's castle doesn't make any sense. Haha. And of course, rather than addressing actual criticisms of their older movies, like with the Jim Crows and Dumbo, they just removed the crows altogether and pandered to the whole baby elephants can't drink alcohol argument that no one ever really had. Lindsay Ellis, who was once part of the Channel Awesome team, actually made a whole video essay about this called Woke Disney, and I highly suggest that you watch it. She mainly points out that meta-commentary about Disney being racist, which is actually a real criticism against the company, can't be profitable. So instead, they lean into criticisms no one ever really had, like over-explaining the Beast's castle or making all the Disney princesses girl bosses and empowered. Because while you can profit off of pop feminism, you can't really profit off of coming clean about racism you helped perpetuate. Doug, of course, helped usher in this era of bad faith criticism, leaning into easy jokes and rips on the logic of children's cartoons and fairy tales to be smug and ruin things for you. And of course, to make you feel stupid in turn for liking those things to begin with. And then you, in turn, would parrot these criticisms to others to make them feel just as stupid as you did. And this cycle continued for years until you had hundreds of bad faith reviewers on YouTube making the same jokes or criticisms in order to feel superior, and that's where we get this culture of bad faith media criticism. And sure, these criticisms never really started as criticisms, but more as jokes. However, they were still veiled as such. Calling a joke a critique makes you look a lot smarter and makes the audience look deeper into the things you're saying, rather than if you just framed it as a joke. Though Doug's public Facebook page declares, "I'm a comedian, laugh," he still frames himself as a critic and his videos as reviews. And thus, what he says in those videos are taken as critiques and taken as reviews and not as jokes. For years, and even to today, he continues to add to this landscape of making fun of movies, which is fine, but also trying to be a legit critic. It's fine to want to just solely laugh and make fun of movies that you liked as a kid, and of course other media and nitpick media that you don't like, or even nitpick media that you do really like. I think it's totally normal to want to feel smug and superior to the media that you're watching, and who doesn't in the end want to feel superior to a kid's film? It's like a little power trip that we can all kind of ride on for a little bit. But the problem is the culture that it creates. Doug started the Nostalgia Critic innocently enough, just wanting to create a community online about things he liked to do and talk about like most online creators. But it snowballed into this era of cynicism and this idea that if you like something that's bad, you yourself aren't as cultured or as smart as Doug or whatever other reviewer. Or even worse, that you yourself believe in all the things that go along with this bad media. Like, wow, you like Beauty and the Beast? Don't you know that Belle has Stockholm Syndrome? What? I can't believe that you would support something like that. And that could work for anything. Ariel getting legs for a guy. Jack could have fit on the door, and you're an idiot for not realizing that. Didn't you know that Titanic is a terrible movie? It makes no sense. And this is the kind of stuff we're still reeling from to this day. Of course, that also doesn't mean that there aren't legit criticisms of The Little Mermaid, Titanic, and of course, the more questionable Disney movies like Pocahontas' and Peter Pan's portrayal of Native Americans. But just that these are reductive statements made in bad faith, and you need to be able to tell the difference between them because not all criticism is made equally. Calling for better representation in film for marginalized people or having women's lives not revolve around men and marriage in movies is not the same thing as saying, "Did you know Belle has Stockholm Syndrome and you shouldn't like Beauty and the Beast because of it?" There seemed to be no room for balanced critique at Channel Awesome or during Channel Awesome's height from 2011 to 2017. All the reviews had to be negative and praise had to be given sparingly because negativity just generates more views. That's why Cinema Win's channel, Everything Great About, got so popular, because people started to get sick of negative reviews. I also think that people just got tired of listening to the same smug white movie reviewers. Chris Duckman, Alex Myers, and Doug Walker reviewing TV shows and movies that aren't made for them or that they wouldn't give a fair shot isn't really that fun. Like, do I really want to see Chris Duckman talk about Twilight? No. Or Alex Myers rant about Riverdale? No. And it's obvious to us now that bad faith criticism is, well, bad, but for a while it wasn't. For a while, we thought that questioning the logic of a universe or complaining about plot contrivances used to move the story along was actually real criticism. And for a while, I looked up to Doug like a lot. Like I said in my other video where I mentioned him, just because Doug didn't market himself as a serious critic didn't mean that I or others didn't care what he had to say. He definitely created a cult of personality around him, whether it was intentional or not, that people really latched onto. Especially when he tried his hand at being a serious serious critic, as well as also being the nostalgia critic. For example, with his editorial videos that I think started around 2013, he tried tackling issues like whitewashing when jokes go too far, and just giving his honest, real thoughts about movies as himself in the nostalgia critic getup. And even earlier in 2011, he started doing his Disney-cember reviews where he focused on solely reviewing Disney movies with an honest tone and heart. And lastly, he did rant reviews about his honest and real thoughts on movies with his brother Rob in Sibling Rivalry and on his own. He slowly started to create this image of himself apart from the nostalgia critic. He started being just Doug. But he still, for some reason, kept the name for the show and also the costume because he doesn't really seem to be able to give it up. Which is honestly very strange to me because people do seem to just like Doug the guy. I mean, his takes weren't always great, his whitewashing video is so confusing, and his comedy ethos of someone always needs to get hurt for a joke to be funny isn't really true. But I think most people know that now, so I feel like he could definitely rebrand. But I guess he needs to keep that NC veil as an excuse as to why he makes some off-color jokes, like talking in a black tent when mocking black actors, and the gun shtick, and the other things he does that would make him look bad if he was just Doug. I think that he thinks that people would unfollow him if he was just himself, which is kind of sad because now he's stuck in this internet landscape that just hates cynical reviews. We're done with questioning the logic of movies. What we want nowadays are more in-depth, well-researched reviews from different voices that aren't just the same white men in their 30s. Doug always said that his biggest influence on reviewing was Roger Ebert, and Roger Ebert wasn't always like the best critic. Sure, he could review movies fine, but his movie reviews about movies that were clearly out of his comfort zone weren't always very fun to read. For example, in his Snowflower and the Secret Fan review, he refers to Hunan as both a period and a province when it's just a province. And then he goes on to be like, well, if this secret women's script is so famous, why isn't it more well known? And it's like, it's a secret language for a reason, and people do know about it now, and people are trying to pass it down. Like, do a little bit of research before you word vomit out an insensitive review about a culture you clearly are not comfortable giving an opinion on. His American Beauty review isn't much better. He calls Angela the most beautiful woman that Lester has ever seen, even though she's like a fucking teenager. And also, Lester is very much perverted, Roger. That's kind of the point of the film. And of course, this isn't to say that Roger Ebert is a bad person. It's just that he didn't really know where his boundaries were of what he could give an opinion on and what he should stay quiet about. But that is kind of very critical when you're a critic. You need to know those boundaries. Or at least do some research before you just start typing out a review. You need to be able to police yourself. And a lot of people just cannot do that. And even me, I am currently working on that too, on knowing my own boundaries and knowing what I need to do research on. And it's something that we should all do. But of course, when it's your job to be a critic, it can be kind of hard. But at the same time, he didn't need to review Snowflower and the Secret Fan. There were other movies out at the time, and it didn't even do that well at the box office, just garnering $11 million. And at the time this review came out, he was already a household name. You know, it wasn't really about income. Maybe he was trying to boost the movie because it didn't do so well, but then he ended up giving it a negative review. So it's like, Doug also loves to quote and reference Anton Ego from Ratatouille. And I think that is good because he is trying to be more like him and state the good things that he likes in movies and not to just pass over them and just focus on the bad. The most poignant part of Ego's speech is that, yeah, sometimes it's hard to admit when you like something, and that's okay. And that as a reviewer, it's hard sometimes because people are expecting you to be mean and nasty, and Anton was so ready to hate on Gusteau's. But then he had to come to the realization that he shouldn't go into reviewing a restaurant with the intent of trying to knock it down or be smug, but rather to give everything and everyone an honest shot. Doug is still balancing on this line where I think he wants to be more balanced, but where he just knows that it's easier to lean into the more, kind of surface level jokes. For example, in his Cheetah Girls review, where he doesn't like the movie because the girls squee too much. Like, who in the name of God wanted the Nostalgia Critic to review the Cheetah Girls movie? Jenny Nicholson talked about the expectations of hating something or having strong opinions on something in her Infinity War video. She said that people expect her to have an opinion on everything, especially if you make a lot of negative reviews. And sometimes you just don't have a strong opinion about a movie, but know that if you do make content about it, it might get clicks, so why not make a review about it? There's a fine line that reviewers need to walk on, and sometimes it is really hard. You need to know your boundaries when critiquing something and know when you're doing more harm than good. Doug doesn't really seem to know or care to know where that line is because this is just his life now, so that line doesn't really matter. He's made his bed and now he has to lie in it. And yeah, he's been doing this Nostalgia Critic thing for like well over a decade, and I don't think he's had another job since the I Quit video in 2008. So now he's just set in his ways, and now he has to do this and finish this out till the end. And honestly, I wish him good luck because I don't think that history will look back on him very kindly. I don't want to paint Doug as a villain or like this evil bad guy because at the end of the day, he is just a person. But sometimes people do irreparable harm to others, and when that becomes known, there's no way to really remember him or engage with him unless he repents. And he has yet to do that or ever address the elephant in the room in a meaningful way. And until he does that, I don't think that he's ever going to get back into my good graces or into anyone else's. So part 3, the aftermath of bad faith criticism. The consequences of bad faith criticism being so popular for a better half of the decade or even the entire decade is going to take years to heal from. Not only did it shape many contemporary reviewers' ideas of what a bad and good movie is, it also shaped the movies themselves, which are now made to be CinemaSins-proof. Production studios of films that don't hold up well enough today either censor parts of their old films completely or put up a disclaimer that doesn't really address the problems within the film itself. And in the remakes, they totally erase racist elements altogether, like the crows and the workers from Dumbo. As someone who was like a huge fan of Doug and really liked taking part in his reviews and the smugness of it all, I'm really glad I eventually phased out of it. And I think part of that is that I never saw CinemaSins or cynical reviewers like Doug Walker as real critics, rather I just saw them as comedians. But now it has dawned on me this harmful culture that they eventually created and that I took part in it. I leaned into the whole cynical view of movies and actually thought that that was what reviewing was. Finding plot holes, feeling smarter than people, and ruining things for the audience. But thankfully now I know better. I think now we can finally put Doug to rest and finally start having nuanced conversations about bad faith media criticism and also the jokes that eventually started it, and to be careful not to conflate the two. Doug is probably never going to come clean about what he did, whether it be about the people he's hurt or how he negatively impacted reviewing movies, and I guess that's fine. And at this point, I honestly doubt that anyone would really care about what he has to say anyway. And I'm also not here to put all of the blame on Doug. He's just one part of the puzzle. There are others like him, as well as his knockoffs, who all like to play into this smug, cynical review style, and the only way to block them out is to just not pay attention to them. They'll always have their audience, and that's fine, but I do think that at least some people are starting to see the flaws in their critiques, and even in their comedy, which at this point just seems recycled. Like, how many times can you question that Scar being named Scar doesn't make any sense before you just sound like a broken record? All we can do now is diversify the voices we listen to and the perspectives that we hear from and amplify their voices, and one day we're just going to look back at this era of candles don't talk and laugh. So the conclusion. So that's all I have to say about the NC. I was a huge fan of him as a kid and even when I was a young adult in college. But after I learned what bad faith criticism was, I could never unsee it. And I do have to say that part of why I never really saw it as bad faith criticism was because I just saw those types of videos as comedy. For example, what's the harm in making fun of Beauty and the Beast? And in the end, there really is nothing wrong with that. I think most of us go through this phase of wanting to feel superior to everything and hate on things, but at the end of the day, Beauty and the Beast is just a really great animated film. And yeah, the film does have deeper themes, and you can do research on the movie and of course give it your honest thoughts and give it a real review, but we need to remember that making jokes about a movie isn't the same as reviewing it. And that goes for lesser films that aren't Beauty and the Beast. All media is a form of art, and that doesn't mean that it's good or bad or high or low, but that it's a human creation and should be given a fair shot. You need to tackle media with the level that it's on. You need to know where the line is, what your boundaries are, and when you're doing more harm than good. That's the responsibility of a serious critic and reviewer, and that's the lesson that took me a while to learn. What do you think about the NC? What do you think about bad faith criticism? Who are your favorite movie reviewer YouTubers right now? Let me know in the comments down below. So that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my content, I post every Tuesday and Friday, so please subscribe and ring the bell to be notified every time I post a new video. And if you liked this video, please give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with someone. My next video will be about Rio 2, so if you haven't seen my first review of Rio 1, yes, it's a franchise, go check it out, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.